Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be with you. This is my first time on an opera stage as a performer, so wish me luck. It is also delightful to be in this place. I have not been to Odessa before, and it is wonderful to be in a city that I know the history of incredibly well and has played an important role in global trade since my ancestors, the Italians, were here so often. We're here today for a very special topic at an incredibly important inflection point, not only in the history of this place, Odessa, and this country, Ukraine, and not only of Europe, but indeed for the world. So much has changed. I've been out of government service now for some 5 years, and so much has changed across the world, and so much has changed right here. We're going to spend time talking about policy and ideas from the Trump administration, the current one, as part of a fireside chat, but I wanted to pitch a central idea. And the idea stems from the topic, right? We've got chess pieces everywhere. When I was a young kid, I actually studied chess for a short period of time before I lost too much, under a Russian chess player. And one of the things that we learned was that chess games can end three ways. You can win, you can lose, or there can be a draw. One of the players can withdraw. I suppose that is yet a fourth possibility. And I want to suggest to you today that there is only one outcome that is remotely tolerable for the world, and that is victory. It's winning. There can be variations. Sometimes you can win by the other player storming out of the room. Sometimes you can win by total defeat and taking that player's king. But always victory is measured in the minds of the two participants and those who were observing the game itself. And I would suggest to you today that if the conclusion of this conflict isn't that those who are observing this game don't understand that this was a win for the good guys and defeat for the bad guys, and it is very clear that the bad guys sit in Moscow, not in Kyiv, then the world will be a very different place. It'll be a different place for so many reasons, right? The Chinese Communist Party will see that aggression can lead to success. Maduro in Venezuela will see the same and threaten us in America and the people of his region. Chairman Kim in North Korea, who I spent way too much time with in my life, will come to see that aggression in the West are mutually related, and that aggression causes the rest to cower. It causes us to be in decline, that we are not prepared to take the risks that have led to the security that delivered for the world since World War II. I think that's just an unacceptable outcome. And so I have since, goodness knows, certainly since I issued the Crimean Declaration, and even before that, been making the case for the centrality of victory. I want to say a couple things that some of you in this room may not appreciate. I must say that in February 22, I was heartbroken by what Vladimir Putin did. He may well have been heartbroken too. He didn't succeed, right? His definition of success was to roll all the way through Ukraine and to begin to threaten NATO countries, both north and south. He failed at that. That's largely due to the boldness, bravery, success strategy of Ukraine and its political leadership as well. But I was heartbroken too, because what that did is it demonstrated the failure of Europe to deter Vladimir Putin, and indeed the failure of the world to deter that kind of aggression. We lost the moment. You may not remember, it may seem like ancient history, but in September of the year prior, it was very clear Vladimir Putin's intention. And Europe scoffed at American intelligence and said, that's not going to happen. And none of us, no one did the requisite, the required, to stop what has now resulted in such massive bloodshed here in this country. It is that deterrence that failed at that time that we must restore. If you ask me, Mike, tell me, what is it that you see as victory? It is the world's perception that we are prepared to take the risks necessary in order not that we win combat, not that we win victories by crushing armies in the field, but that we preserve peace in the world and are modeled and are perceived in the world as strong enough and determined enough and prepared to fight collectively such that these wars never begin. That, my friends, was our failure. I've seen too many of us in the West pat ourselves on the back and say, look what we've done since February of 2022. Look at the money that we have spent. Look at the support that we have provided to Ukraine. I must say, I'm happy about that. I think that's fine. But it misunderstands how this all began and the failures that precipitated the place that we all find ourselves today. Last thought, and then I'll take questions. That deterrence, that model that would have and could have prevented what happened doesn't end with a ceasefire. It doesn't end the day that Vladimir Putin says, at least for the moment, I'm going to stop. This is a man who has no intention of changing. He has been pursuing the vision of restoring what he once knew as the greater Russian Empire, the Soviet Union. His vision has not changed and is not going to change. That means our resolve must be forever. It's not the case that we can sign an agreement, make a deal, bring NATO closer together. This model of deterrence must remain. It can't be that we rise in the moment when we are under threat, and when we perceive peace, then we go back to the ways of old. Because if we do that, the next generation of Ukrainian children will have to risk their lives. And the next generation of European kids will have to risk their lives, and indeed the next generation of the God-fearing people of the United States of America may well have to risk their lives as well. We cannot permit that to happen. And so I'd posit this. You know, in chess, there's this concept, and in warfare, this concept of blitzkrieg. Move quickly, attack the enemy, be vicious. Sun Tzu wrote about it slightly differently. But I would suggest that even the model that this conflict has been fought on has been insufficiently aggressive. The West has not been prepared to do the necessary, which is to impose sufficient costs on Vladimir Putin and his regime, the leadership team around him, to impose enough costs on them such that they're prepared to actually stand down for a moment, for a time. We know this is a constant challenge, but today he believes the benefits of continuing this conflict exceed the costs, and we have to flip that. I'm certainly happy to talk about what that might look like, but what it begins with is this. It begins with the resolve to articulate this as the vision. It begins by speaking less about the things that we won't do. The things that we will deny the Ukrainian people the capacity to do to inflict real costs on Vladimir Putin. And we will speak more about the things that we will do, and that we might do, and that we are prepared to do. And that we will demonstrate not only that we have the capacity, the tools, the weapons, the human capital, the people, the intelligence capabilities, all the things that go with true hard power, but that we have the will to do that. To the extent that we are unprepared as nations or as partners, that we're unprepared to demonstrate our will to actually impose those costs, I fear that we will find ourselves not only where we are today, but worse, and that the continued conflict will do just that. We're better than that, we're more capable than that, and I believe we are stronger than that. And I pray that conferences like this one, in this very special place, will be a small part of making clear to the world this resolve, and to the people that each of you as government officials, and those of you who are like me today, civilians or business leaders, that you'll do the necessary to ensure that that will is real and serious and communicated to the bad guys, such that we can bring this conflict and those that may follow it to a brisk end. Thank you. I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your inspiring speech, and it's a great honor. I will give you the micro. we have. That's. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much again, and welcome once again to Odessa and to Odessa Opera House. And we are so proud, you know, in art history of the world, there were many debuts on opera stage happening here. Now one more historical event, Secretary Pompeo's opera stage debut happened right now, right here. There are applause, dear friends and colleagues.
That's very kind, thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary. And let me start, your name is very well known in Ukraine, with a big respect, and one of big reasons for this is the Crimean Declaration. Pompeo Declaration, it's also called in our country, like it was Wallace Declaration in 1940 about Baltic states being not recognized to be part of Soviet Union. And I just, if I may, I will quote, as we did, it was July 2018, and your declaration said, as we did in the Wallace Declaration in 1940, the United States reaffirms as policy its refusal to recognize the Kremlin's claims of sovereignty over territory seized by force in contravention of international law. In concert with allies, partners, and the international community, the United States rejects Russia's attempted annexation of Crimea and pledges to maintain this policy until Ukraine's territorial integrity is restored. Absolutely great words. But today we hear from media, some leaks, that United States is considering possibility recognizing of illegally annexed Crimea to be Russian. And do you think it's possible? What is your attitude to this? Thank you.
Look, I don't know. I don't do crystal balls or predictions. I hope not. It would be a mistake of epic proportions. I get the frustration, and I get the physical reality of the place. I'm not naive about what's physically possible in this moment. But that doesn't mean one should go and say, no, we are giving up for all time. This is one of the things I hope to communicate. I get asked often, when will this end? And my answer sadly, my answer sadly comes from my Christian faith, which is, there's evil in the world. It doesn't end the day that Vladimir Putin says, I'm going to cease the current operations. There are bad people that want to undermine the freedom and liberty that the people of Ukraine want desperately. And they want to do the same to the United States of America, and they're trying to do it to the Israelis, right? So this challenge is, we always think about it in fits and starts, but the truth is it's continuous. And I think that's what many forgot in the West. In the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, they took a holiday and said it's over, right? It's not, and so we ought not to preclude Crimea being not only part of Ukraine but a functional, operational part of Ukraine by recognizing it, even if it is not achievable to do what we all would really like to see happen there. In the moment. This continues, and there will be another day. Just as no one expected the Soviet Union to fall in 1989, things happen and they break, but they only do so in the face of enormous resolve and real cost-imposing actions on the part of the West.
Thank you very much. Very strong answer, and thank you very much for such position. Thank you. And as you told right now about resilience, and you know, I just want to ask you how Ukraine today is perceived in DC, in Washington, in American political elites, in team of President Trump. What do I mean? As you know, our topic of our forum is chess, and we use these analogies. And many thought 3 years ago that Ukrainian role in this big chess game was to be a sacrificial pawn. But thanks to resilience of Ukrainian people and courage, we promoted ourselves with the support of our friends and allies, to the queen, from the pawn to the queen. Really, today, Ukraine has, not just we with the force, opened the Black Sea. Having no big military ships, we destroyed big part of Russian Black Sea fleet. But also today we have 1 million infantry, battle-hardened, who know what is the warfare of 21st century. And this is absolutely priceless, and this is a huge asset that the United States can have as a player. So you can take us, use us, help us today, but use us tomorrow. I mean, if it will be needed, who will be in trenches near Tehran or Beijing if it will be needed? Ukrainians proved themselves that we are ready, that we can. So taking all this into account, is this recognized in DC today, in Washington, by administration? Is Ukraine seen as a real, very important chess piece, or just as a pawn which can be sacrificed?
Oh, goodness. Some of each by different folks. For sure, it's difficult to extrapolate across everyone's thinking. I must say, even in, I know everyone's view on President Trump. I have a different view to a material degree, but suffice it to say, I think it's become very clear, by the way, to the United States security establishment that we have a lot to learn about warfare with the advent of UAVs and drones and AI technology and electronic surveillance and ESW warfare and jamming, that there's lots of things that we had systems that we paid an awful lot of money for that are probably not functional. And so we have a different both equipment and training requirement. And I think we are preparing to take on board many of the lessons that have been learned from that. Every conflict's different, but this is, this is a great power that Ukraine is fighting, right? Always we talk about great power conflict. This isn't fighting al-Shabaab in Somalia or taking on ISIS. This is fundamentally different from that. And I do think there's a lot to learn. As for the deeper question about whether it's viewed as a pawn, I don't think that anyone believes that. I don't think anybody thinks, oh my goodness, we can sacrifice that and get peace. I haven't ever heard that articulated. There have been many in my party, my own party, the Republican Party, that have disappointed me deeply and have said things that are inconsistent with what I think are the deep American interests that we have here. But I think they all also know that in the end, there's no walking away from this for the United States, right? It's not the case that you can say, Godspeed, you're on your own. This will continue to chase all of us who believe in basic human dignity, property rights, all the things, all the indicia of sovereign nationhood. I think that will ultimately come to prevail. I regret, right? I regret that there was not more done in 2014, that there was not more done in 2022, and that deterrence was lost. And now the challenge is putting it back to a place. I mean, I was adjacent to the Minsk conversations, right? People forget, well, we're going back to the negotiating table. Well, we've been at the negotiating table an awful lot, and there was no hammer. And I get it. It was at a different time. There was fighting on the line of control, but not the massive aggression that transpired in February 22. But the issues, I'll bet if you went and looked at the debate issue papers from the Minsk conversations, they would look almost identical to the same conversations that were taking place today. And so that must remind us all that when Vladimir Putin lays down his weapons for a moment, you can't go back to Russian gas. When Vladimir Putin lays down his weapons for a moment, they can't be life as it once was. It must be with the deep recognition that this could easily happen again. It may not be in Ukraine next time. It may be on the northern flank. It could be Russians taking action somewhere else in the world, right? They still have troops on the ground in Syria. The Russians are in Venezuela. This is a global challenge presented by a raunchous power who truly believes that the way of the world in the West is not something they want to permit to exist.
Thank you very much. One more question, because of time difference, the last 3 months, Ukrainians woke up. We are not probably first thing washing our teeth, but we are reading the tweets of President Trump and many other American politicians. And sometimes we are getting overexcited about this. Sometimes we are getting very sad reading this. And I want to ask you, as a person who knows everybody, who understands this, help us to translate what should be our attitude, how we should explain to ourselves what's really going on.
So that's funny you asked that question. So when I was a Secretary of State, I was just reminded of this. I was the 70th Secretary of State for the United States. At that time, President Trump was the 45th president. And so I would always do the math and remember there was a lot more turnover in my job than his. And I remember, too, how my predecessor was fired. It was by tweet. And so every morning I would do what you just described. I'd pick up my phone, check Twitter, make sure I had a job, go to work. For 2.5 years. I made it all 4 years. So you should pick up your phone, you should read your phone, and then you should get on with doing the things that matter. It's easy sometimes, and I get it. President Trump can dominate the news like no other human being I've ever encountered. It's easy to get excited when he says, I'm really getting frustrated with Vladimir Putin. And it's easy to become unhappy when President Trump says something like, you know, if we don't get a deal done in the next week, we're going to walk away. What's real and true is what you should focus on, and the things that you can do, whatever your role may be, as a parliamentarian in a European country, as an EU leader, or as Ukrainian leadership, or as a business person. Concentrate on the things you can do, the things that can have impact. Continue to make the case. This is what I have tried to do. I've spent, I was in Congress for 6 years, and I try to avoid Capitol Hill. But I have spent time there focused, really trying to convince the folks in my party, give them the language and the understanding necessary to make the case for what America's interested in, what we need to do to protect ourselves and make sure that we don't have to put our young men and women at risk, and make sure that we still live in a world that looks like the world that delivered so wonderfully for the West, for Europe and the United States broadly, and even for the Western countries in Asia, right? This rules-based system, the post-World War II system, is under real threat, and we have a deep interest in preserving it as best we can with the tools that we have available. And I spend a lot of time doing that. So I advise folks, do the best you can. It's difficult. Avoid the noise, follow the signal, what is really taking place, and I think you'll find that you'll have a more accurate understanding of what's really transpiring.
Thank you very much. You were 70th, please. You were 70th Secretary of State, but 6th, if I'm not mistaken, Director of Central Intelligence Agency. So you had a very consistent job too. Thank you. Thank you very much. One more question is, we are at the shore of Black Sea. By the way, it's the only Black Sea conference which happened on the Black Sea shore, because sometimes we hear somewhere in the world happening something about Black Sea. But here we are in the capital of the Black Sea, the biggest city, the biggest harbors. And on Monday, we are waiting for a new round of negotiations in Istanbul between Russian and Ukrainian delegation. And what we feel here, and which was discussed during these 2 days here in Odessa, that the lesson of the Black Sea to this diplomacy is that Russia understands only language of force. Because when Putin, when he attacked, he stopped commercial vessels, commercial shippings in the Black Sea for the first half year. Then it was a grain deal with Turkey and President Erdogan. It worked not so good. It worked some, but not so good. Then Russia left. And then when Ukraine destroyed a big part of Russian Black Sea fleet and at first attacked Russian tanker with Russian oil, immediately everything stopped. And now you can see, today you will work in Odessa, you can see in the sea a lot of vessels coming in and out. So this is the success, but this success was because Russia was just punched in the face. And immediately they changed behavior. So what do you think about these lessons, and what would you advise to Ukrainian negotiation team, American negotiation team, how to negotiate with Russia in such circumstances?
Negotiations are downstream of true power. You captured it perfectly. If there's no hammer, Vladimir Putin will sit at the table and make demands that are simply not acceptable to Ukraine, to Europe, or to the United States of America. So you're right about a punch in the face. I'll give you the real-world examples from my time as a practitioner. And by the way, I get asked often, like, why is it that Vladimir Putin didn't take part of Ukraine for the first 4 years of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration? Why is it? The folks from the other party would say, y'all were just lucky. Fair enough. As a believer, it could just be the good Lord. I'm happy to accept that too. I actually think it was much deeper than that. I actually think it was the fear of being punched in the face. This was the deterrence that I was referring to. Why did he not fear Barack Obama and take Crimea? Because the evidence was he was just going to roll over. Why did he, in February 22, when President Biden, right, literally months after the Trump administration, why did he move then? It's because he thought, look what happened in Afghanistan. This is not a leader who's prepared to actually defend things that matter. And so his perception of risk changed. We had some of those moments too. There was There was a night when in Syria, the Russians were coming across. There was a kind of a implicit deal that the Americans in Syria would be on the west side of the Euphrates River, and the Russians would be on the east side. And one night I get a call from General Dumford, who was then the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said the Russians are coming across. We need to respond. Here's the ideas. We all went and had our conversations. We recommended to the president that we communicate to the Russians that they needed to stop, and if not, that we would stop them. And so we did that. We each called our counterparts, military and intelligence counterparts and diplomatic counterparts, and they denied they were moving across the river. And we said, do we need to show you the satellite photos? Come on, let's get serious. And they kept moving. We killed 300 Russians, the first Russians killed in combat in an awfully long time. By the way, full credit to President Trump for doing that. I don't know that another president would have done that. There's an enormous amount of risk when you're an American killing Russians. I get it. The risk of escalation is real. We had unprotected troops throughout the Middle East. So this wasn't an easy decision for him in spite of the recommendation from his team. So I give him full credit. I think he saw that and said, "Oh my gosh, that's different, right? That's not how others would have responded." Was it small? Yeah. Was it Wagner Force people? Sure. But man, it was express and clear. And you know, they never came across the river again. Those are the kind of things that Vladimir Putin understands, and that is the core point. So you know, I don't even know if there'll be a conversation in Istanbul on Monday. I don't know who will actually show up. But at some level, it seems relatively futile to me, absent a willingness to say, nope, we're going to allow the Ukrainians to actually go do what they did in the Black Sea and to put Russian assets at risk. And the U.S. for an extended period of time said, no, that's not acceptable. There's too much risk of escalation. And while, you know, I'm happy that Vladimir Putin hasn't pulled out his nuclear arsenal yet, and that risk is always there. Man, my observation as a former practitioner was when he sees a nation prepared to do hard things and take risk and actually impose cost, then and only then will his behavior change. And so that's where we find ourselves today. I think that's what we're going to have to go do again. And we should do it, and we should do it collectively and with the full support, I hope, of every NATO nation. And I know we talk about NATO as a singular entity. Trust me, it's no more singular than the EU. 27 voices all shouting loudly something different often. But we ought to find a unified path forward to impose those costs on him and make clear to him that we're prepared to do what we have always done. And when we do, we'll get another moment that is more peaceful than the one we find ourselves in today.
Fantastic answer. Thank you very much. We are coming to the end. I would just want to tell you that I hope in 1 year here in Odessa and the next Black Sea Security Forum, we will praise how President Trump put Putin on his place, how it will be done. We hope, fingers crossed, it will happen. When we just entered with you this beautiful venue, you liked it very much, and it was as an Odessa native, for me it was like, you know, big happiness. And I showed you there is a special place here, Imperial Box. This box was built as a place for Russian emperors to listen to opera here in Odessa. And I want to assure you there is one man who is badly desperate to sit in that box. It's self-proclaimed Russian Emperor Vladimir Putin, but he can't, and we will never let him do this. But I want to tell you, and please send this message to the United States and to President Trump. We invite President Trump in Imperial Box of Odessa Opera, being a peaceful city after Russia will be kicked out. Amen. And the Black Sea will be secured. And that will be the best opera ever in this opera house.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Pompeo.
Okay.